Israeli intelligence has saved countless lives in Europe by preventing terror attacks, declares Netanyahu as he insists EU leaders will follow Trump by recognizing Jerusalem as the nation's capital. Benjamin Netanyahu told EU leaders that Israel has saved countless lives by preventing terror attacks in Europe and stopping the spread of militant Islam as he visited Brussels on Monday. Netanyahu, who met with EU Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini in the first such visit by an Israeli premier for 22 years, also insisted that the Union will follow Donald Trump in recognizing Jerusalem as the nation's capital. Speaking about Trump's decision last week, he said, "It makes peace possible because recognizing reality is the substance of peace, the foundation of peace. There is now an effort to bring forward a new peace proposal by the American administration. I think we should give peace a chance. I think we should see what is presented and see if we can advance this peace. It's time that the Palestinians recognize the Jewish state and also recognize the fact that it has a capital. It's called Jerusalem," he said. "I believe that, even though we don't have an agreement yet, this is what will happen in the future. I believe that all, or most, of the European countries will move their embassies to Jerusalem, recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital and engage robustly with us for security, prosperity and peace." Mogherini reiterated that the bloc would continue to recognize the international consensus on Jerusalem. She repeated the Union's commitment to a two-state solution and that it was in Israel's interest to find a sustainable solution to its conflicts with the Palestinians. The Israeli military destroyed a Hamas tunnel stretching from the Gaza Strip into its territory on Sunday. Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, a military spokesman, told reporters that Israel had used a new set of tools developed since the 2014 war with Hamas in order to destroy the tunnel. He said forces had detected the tunnel months ago and continued to monitor construction efforts by Hamas militants before demolishing it. Israel has made neutralizing the tunnel threat a top priority since that war, when Hamas militants on several occasions made their way into Israel. Although they did not manage to reach civilian areas, the infiltrations caught Israel off guard, killing 5 soldiers in one attack, and terrified the local population. Conricus said a new system involving combat units, military intelligence, logistics and research had been used to destroy the tunnel. The EU, she said, would step up its peace efforts and would hold talks with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas next month. She also condemned attacks on Israel and on Jews elsewhere in the world, including in Europe where a synagogue was firebombed in the Swedish city of Gothenburg at the weekend. A demonstration condemning Netanyahu's visit is planned for later in the morning in Brussels. Netanyahu's comments came after a meeting with Emmanuel Macron in Paris on Sunday, in which he said the sooner Palestinians can accept Jerusalem as Israel's capital, the sooner there will be peace. Macron called for Netanyahu to show courage in restarting the peace process and called for an end to Jewish settlement building in the West Bank. In a concession to Netanyahu, he started the statement by condemning all the attacks of the last few days, including rockets launched by Hamas at the Jewish state. Netanyahu had earlier said he planned to rebuke Macron for condemning Trump's statement, but ignoring the attacks by Hamas. The Jewish leader also hit out at Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who had earlier branded Israel a terrorist country that kills children. "I am not used to receiving lectures about morality from a leader who bombs Kurdish villagers in his native Turkey, who jails journalists, who helps Iran get around international sanctions, and who helps terrorists, including in Gaza, kill innocent people," Netanyahu said. "That is not the man who is going to lecture us." Macron had taken a phone call from Erdogan, according to a source close to the Turkish leader, and agreed that Trump's declaration had not been good for the region. Erdogan also spoke to other regional leaders and vowed to do everything possible to reverse the declaration. Earlier on Sunday, a 25-year-old Israeli security guard was left in critical condition after being stabbed at Jerusalem's central bus station. The guard was attacked with a kitchen knife by a 24-year-old Palestinian from the West Bank as he approached a metal detector who fled but was arrested after being tackled by a passerby. Meanwhile, demonstrators burned Israeli flags and clashed with police elsewhere in the West Bank, while Palestinian Christians also held a march denouncing Trump's decision. In Lebanon, scenes outside the U.S. Embassy turned ugly as police were forced to use tear gas and water cannon to force back rioters who tried to storm the building. Marchers in Jalalabad, Afghanistan, also burned effigies of Trump, and thousands gathered on the streets of Jakarta, Indonesia, in a fourth straight day of anger. Missiles were fired into Israel from Gaza on Friday night, provoking a response from Israeli fighter jets and tanks that left 2 members of Hamas dead. The most serious disturbances came at Rachel's tomb near Hebron, in Tel Karm and on the outskirts of Bethlehem. A Palestinian youth was critically injured when he was hit in the eye by a rubber bullet in Ramallah, local media reported. The Israeli police spokesman, Mickey Rosenfeld, denied this, saying that protesters were precisely injured in the lower part of the body. Meanwhile, 3 Israelis were wounded as a bus traveling near Haifa in northern Israel came under attack by Arab youths hurling rocks. The driver was injured by flying glass and evacuated to hospital, while 2 passengers were treated at the scene, near the town of Araro. Police made 2 arrests. Demonstrations were also held elsewhere in the country, including in Umm el-Fahm, Rihat, Tira and Tamara, but these were significantly smaller than those seen on Friday's Day of Rage. Nevertheless, the protests on Friday and the subsequent scuffles were less serious than had been expected, falling well short of the new intifada demanded by Hamas. It came after about 25,000 Israelis demanded that Mr. Netanyahu resign by taking to the streets of Tel Aviv last night, chanting "Mafia, Mafia," and "being a pig isn't kosher." They were voicing concerns over claims that Mr. Netanyahu received gifts from wealthy businessmen and made a deal with a newspaper for positive reporting, and that legislation was drafted to keep the allegations secret. A similar protest in Haifa turned violent when a group of anarchists supporting the boycott of Israel joined the march. The rallies followed a huge demonstration last week, when about 30,000 people spontaneously protested against corruption on Rothschild Boulevard, one of Tel Aviv's most iconic streets, in one of the largest rallies in recent memory. Naftali Bennett, the right-wing leader of the Beit Yehudi party, made a bold pitch to become Israel's next prime minister, saying he has broad experience in business, economics, government and security, and "I plan to use all of it." He stopped short, however, of calling for early elections. In a further sign of diplomatic backlash over the Trump announcement, a Palestinian Authority official confirmed that its president, Mahmoud Abbas, would pull out of a meeting with U.S. Vice President Mike Pence later this month. A White House aide said that the meeting was still scheduled, however, adding that would be counterproductive for Mr. Abbas to cancel it. Palestinian officials are understood to be lobbying the UN Security Council to pass a resolution demanding that the U.S. withdraw its recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. 14 out of the 15 members of the Security Council condemned Mr. Trump's move in an emergency meeting in New York on Friday. Yesterday, the Arab League demanded that the U.S. change its stance on Jerusalem for fear that it would stoke further unrest across the region. Israeli forces were seen at Bab al-Rama Cemetery in East Jerusalem on Sunday after Israeli authorities on Tuesday demolished several graves and occupied East Jerusalem's historical Bab al-Rama Cemetery east of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. It is thought those destroyed were Muslim graves. The cemetery has a long history of people destroying graves in political and religious protests.